You're listening to another great podcast in the MyMac Podcasting Network.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the show where we take a wander around the week in Apple, Apple News, reviews, technology, associated products, and all sorts of other things that catch our eye. This is another episode of the Essential Apple Podcast. Hello, listeners, and welcome to another episode of the Essential Apple. Well, this week, in the wake of the Apple It's Showtime keynote, and having had the luxury of a few days to think about it all, I'm joined by a very special guest. I'm honoured to say that I have the very perspicacious Carolina Milanesi of Creative Strategies and Tech.pinions. And we're going to have a look at what we thought was hot and not, and consider why we felt like quite a lot of it didn't feel fully baked. So, welcome, Carolina. It's an honour to have you on.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Well, thank you. I know we had Tim on. We had Tim Baharan on a while ago. But for anybody who didn't listen to that, would you like to explain to the listeners exactly what it is you do as an industry analyst?
Yeah, apparently I spend a lot of time on planes and and attend events. In between those plane rides and events, I write about tech. I've been a consumer tech analyst for longer than I want to admit. I started out in the UK with Gartner, where I spent a good part of my career, and then moved to Silicon Valley in 2012. Had a couple of years of experimenting with consumer research at another UK company, Kantar, and then joined Creative Strategies. It will actually be 3 years this week coming that I joined them to do something a bit different than most consumer research do, which is bringing the knowledge that we have of the market that we've been studying for so long, especially Tim, and then the ability to also have consumer studies. And that's what I do. I help companies in tech with their understanding of a broader market, competitors, and then I write for Tech.pinions and other publications to try and have a little bit of my thoughts shared, and especially on topics that I care a lot about, like diversity in tech and education and other things.
Ah, that's excellent. And I will just ask, are you familiar with Kelly Gamont at Verso?
I am not, actually.
No, then maybe I should put you in touch with her, because she's involved with the App Camp for Girls.
Oh, okay.
Which is focused on getting I forget what age, but young girls. They do a week where they have to build an app. And
nice.
Over the course of a week, they learn how to code and build an app. And as a team, they work. They build as a team. And so the focus is that you can work in tech and not necessarily have to be a coder. There are other things that go with building an app. There are designers. There are
absolutely
graphics people. There are and so they build an app, and then at the end of the week they have to pitch this app to a kind of Dragon's Den team.
Oh, nice.
To see who they think has developed the best tool. And if I'm not wrong, the winners of the week get to build their app and put it on the App Store.
That's awesome. I've seen similar things with robotics, but never for apps. That is great.
Yep. Well, after the show, I'll send you an email address, and I'll let her know. Anyway, be that as it may. Yeah, be that as it may. I think you'd get on with her. She's a bit of a ball of lightning, but she's great. She's great fun.
We like those women. We like those women. Yes.
She's great fun. When she comes on the show, Mark always says, well, I love it when Kelly comes on. We just ask her what she thinks and then let her talk for an hour and a half, and then then we sign off. No, she's a very interesting woman, very, very fun. Okay, well, obviously, of course, this week, Apple had their Showtime keynote on Monday evening here, morning for those of you in Silicon Valley, of course, where they released, what was it, Apple News Plus, the Apple Arcade, the Apple Card, credit card, and Apple TV Plus, and also touted their original content yet to come. You, of course, wrote a piece for Tech.pinions about that, as did, I believe, Bob and Tim and Ben and half the rest.
Everybody did this week. There was so much to say.
There was so much stuff. And I've got a link here, actually, from Elmer DeWitt, Apple 3, which says what the indie analysts are saying, which was kind of a roundup of what everybody thought. So anybody listening, if you want to follow that link, you can find out what everybody had to say. So I guess we should just start at the start, really, Carolina. News Plus, what was your take on that one?
Given their acquisition of Texture about a year ago, we know something was coming sooner or later that concerned magazines. Apple obviously tried to do magazines before with Newsstand, where it was slightly at the beginning of the iPad, and things didn't go very well. Sometime in the market, you just start too early, and I think that at the time, just the magazine and the paper industry was in a different stage of moving to digital and trying different things with digital. But having played with the app over the course of a week, I have to say that it does feel not quite ready yet. It feels more like a beta than a full released app. And what I mean by it is that obviously for $9.99, having access to 300 plus magazine plus the Washington Post and the LA Times here, and there are other collaborations that Apple is closing with different countries. So I believe in Canada is, for instance, the Star. So you have a lot of content. If you think how much a magazine costs, just a single issue, obviously justifying $9.99 a month is not very hard. But when you look at the quality of some of the magazines, the one that they highlighted, like the New Yorker, for instance, are awesome. The design is really draws you in and it wants you to read more. But there are a lot of magazines that are not actually designed with a digital experience in mind, and you find yourself flipping through the pages the same way as you would a real magazine. And that the experience lets you down a little bit. The hope is that for the big titles, obviously, Apple will put tools available, and magazine owners will realize that the more they design for that digital experience, the more engagement they're gonna have. But at the end of the day, you always will find some magazines. I don't know. We have bull mastiffs in the house, so if I get the bull mastiffs weekly, I doubt that they'll put much effort because they just can't justify the spend in making their publication. And I made it up, so I don't know, and I don't want to speak for them. But the point being, if you're a small magazine, you're not gonna just have the money to have a team design and put all the effort for every issue that you publish. So it'd be interesting to see what consumers are going to feel like after their first month trial, and starting a lot of people just forget about it, and they realize 6-7 months in that they're still paying $9.99 and didn't know about it. But be interesting to see how many will subscribe to it, or if some people will wait a little bit and see how much work Apple is going to put into it to make it a bit smoother as an experience, especially search.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, at the moment, because I'm in the UK and it's only available in the US and Canada at the moment, I can't check it out. I have to say that as a value proposition, $9.99, and of course they do have the fact that you can share that with your family. So
that's right.
So you don't have to have
that's
one.
Huge.
That's a big thing, because for example, if I was to subscribe to such a service, I would be able to, let my daughters choose whatever magazines they wanted to subscribe to, etc. So that was a big thing. I think that was a nice touch.
Yeah.
In comparison, however, there's already a service called Readly, at readly.com, who for basically the same price, it's $7.99 a month in the UK, and that has access to nearly 4,000 magazines. Wow. And I mean, if you go to their site, they've got Autocar, they've got T3, they've got Hello, they have Cosmopolitan, Good Housekeeping, Woman's Health, and nearly 4,000 titles. So I think Apple have got some work to do there to convince people. I mean, I know the one thing that Apple have, of course, is the power of default. And,
right.
As Oprah said, 1 billion pockets, y'all. And if you listen to the Cultcast, Earthon jokingly said, "I'm suing Oprah for that. She's stolen my Tim Cook impression." So there's that. And although, as you were saying, the work to put something on there for a smaller publication could be strenuous, which I think is probably why Apple have allowed also PDF magazines.
Right.
Because if you're a smaller, publisher, you could still sign up and just have your magazine presented as a PDF. And at the minute, several of the people I know, who've in the Slack room, for example, have said that actually at the moment, although the Apple magazine format is nice, sometimes the PDF magazines are better because they retain the feel of the original. And some of the ones done in Apple format feel like they've just been done from a template and become a bit samey. So more work to do there, I think. And I think, the Readly thing, which is available, I'm not sure in how many countries, but a lot of countries. Certainly in Europe, I think you can get it pretty much everywhere in Europe. So, and obviously with no doubt regionalised magazines. So that's, I think that's a big hurdle to overcome at the moment. I know how Apple are though. They will grow this, I'm sure. But my other thought is, are enough people committed to magazines?
That, I think, is the bigger question, because I think a lot of people that read magazine actually like real magazines. It's a bit different than papers, because just what you do, right? You read papers to get news, and so you are looking for usually something specific. It's not entertainment. It's not, although obviously reading magazine is educational too, but you have a different mindset to it. And so the idea of like, for a lot of people, books still, you want to touch something physical, and the glossy paper, and a lot of the magazines that are around fashion and clothing, all that kind of stuff, have perfume samples in them. There's a whole lot of level that you get from a magazine when you have a physical copy of it versus a digital one. So I think you do find very strong sentiment the same way as people do with book. It's funny, I was talking to my husband about, are we subscribing, are we not? And he's one of those people who's like, I cannot read a magazine that is not made of paper. And he's adamant about it. And he buys all, he's also one of those people that buy real books. But, it is interesting that you get into that very personal and emotional conversation where things like this get involved. So it'll be interesting, but definitely this feels very much like a Gen 1, and we'll have to see how much effort Apple. It reminded me, at the beginning when iPad came out, that we had the 2X apps. Yes. And you had some that were optimized for iPad that were great. And then it was like, oh, okay, I just blow this one up till they're gonna. That's very much how it feels today.
Yeah. Obviously, as I say, I can't experience it firsthand, but
Trust me.
Yeah, I do. The other thing, of course, about magazines, as you were saying, about people who like to have a physical copy. Is particularly with hobbyist magazines,
Yes.
cars or
Cars. Mm-hmm.
I don't know, games, whatever. People like to collect them.
Yes.
There are people who have collections of, I don't know, auto car or practical classics or I don't know, horse and hound that go back decades. And the one thing you can't really do with a digital copy, I don't think, is you cannot have that shelf full of magazines and go back and pull out. Yes, well, in 1976, this is the state of the hobby.
Yeah.
There we go. Well, we'll move on. I think. Apple Arcade. Now, this was a different kettle of fish altogether, really, because it's iOS specific, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It is.
I kind of liked the idea. Of course, they haven't announced a price for this. They're saying it will have exclusive games without in-app purchases or advertising, and it will be iOS specific. My big thing about that is, again, are enough people committed to iOS games to want to pay a monthly subscription? I don't know. Hard to tell.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? Because we are at the time when more and more people are getting used to play, especially the big names across platforms. And I'm not a gamer myself, but I have an 11-year-old who is totally a gamer. And the ability that she has to play Fortnite on her iPad, as well as on her Surface, as well as on Xbox, and is one account, one experience, is the same game that she loves with different things, because she, obviously games are not all the same as far as what you get on the platform, but is the same game. And she carries her friends with her wherever platform she's on, and it doesn't matter. It's about the game, not what she's using to play. And that's more and more what the big names are doing. But what I liked about Arcade, which is not a response to what Google did with Stadia. So, we're also at the time where everybody's talking about streaming versus consoles and on-device gaming. And this is not what Arcade is about. What I liked about it is the idea that there are very good publishers and app developers out there that put out great content, but finding it hard to sustain that quality throughout the life of the game, because they want to bring out games that are more like storytelling type games where you don't continuously pay money for levels or cheats or skins, and they actually design for the pleasure that the game itself brings. So is a self-contained experience, and it's hard to make money when you do that, because you're selling your game initially, and then you don't have way to monetize throughout like the other guys do, either through advertising or in-app purchase. And that's what I like about the idea that Apple has come up with of working with this kind of developers and bringing out a subscription that focuses around these games. Now, they didn't give official explanation of how, well, first of all, how much we're going to pay, but then how that revenue is going to be shared. But there were people discussing the fact that the revenue among the games in the subscription would be shared based on how much time you actually engage with the game. And so it's proportional. You get as much money as I spend time playing. And so you then wonder if the game is going to be designed with having in mind that not just to keep me entertained and keep me on, but to make it so that I spend more time on the game, which is a different way of enticing, if you like, your audience and bring some some challenges. But I like the idea of having a place, especially for younger players where they're not targeted by advertising and, they're not constantly monetized on. So I like that idea.
Yeah, I'll agree with you there. I think that there's a potential for it to become something that people are happy to pay for their children. If you could get, there are games like Water and Water 2. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one. But it would be nice to have games that particularly younger children could be, let loose on without fear of them getting, just buy this bundle of gooberries for $99 or whatever it is.
Yes.
The famous Smurfs $99 wheelbarrow, So that could be a selling point for sure. The other thing is, of course, most of these things, they didn't announce any pricing, and I've got a little bit of a theory about that to some extent. Partly, I suspect these services are not 100% ready. And in some ways, announcing things before they're ready is dangerous. CF Air Power, RIP. But I wonder if, in some respects, this isn't a sort of market research feeler, because everybody's out there talking about it, and Apple could actually develop quite a lot of feedback about what people want or think they want and how much they think they're prepared to pay. As I said to you, on Twitter, if the general zeitgeist, across the web is arcade is nice, but I wouldn't pay more than $5 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Apple could get a feel for that and not bother trying to launch it at $10 a month. What do you think about that? Do you think that's a possibility?
Yeah, so there's one side of me that always thinks Apple does whatever they want to do, right?
Yeah.
And so they have something in mind, but they are getting in a new territory. They're as much as Tim Cook spent time on stage explaining to people that obviously Apple is not new to services per se. There are things that they're doing differently, and so I do think that they're also a very different company than they used to be. So I do think that they listen more than they used to. I think the other part is that some of their competing services, even if they are different in nature, but a lot of consumers will think about it as far as where I'm putting my money, right? Where do I decide I have X amount of disposable income? Where do I put it? Are yet to be announced. So Google Stadia that I mentioned earlier, we don't know how much that is going to cost.
No,
so I think that's the other part is seeing what else is going to be out there that in a way is competing with money. And of course, the other part is Stadia is Google. So if you have an iOS device, we don't know yet how that is going to work.
That was quite interesting, that, because they said it works via Chrome, so it works with the Chromecast and the Chrome OS and the Chrome browser. And then I read stories which said even on iOS it won't work with even if you use the Chrome browser. But then I read other stories which kind of contradicted that and said that Google basically was saying we haven't yet got it working on iOS.
Yeah.
Strange.
That's the nature of Google, though, right? So they are multi-platform. They don't, when it's about services, is getting as many users as they possibly can. So I'd be surprised if they don't find a way to make it work on iOS. There is a different principle than the conversation that I'm sure we'll have shortly about Apple TV and not being available on Android yet.
Yes, I was going to say, yes, you mentioned that in your piece, and we will talk about. Actually, shall we skip forward to that? We'll leave the Apple card and go forward to the TV Plus thing, which I'll be honest, I found the most boring part of the presentation. It kind of dragged on a bit.
It went on for a bit, yeah.
Yeah, and they had all these, they were rolling out all these stars to come and talk. And I can't remember, was it on Tech.pinions? Was it you and Ben saying that presentation wasn't really for us, the consumers? It was pitched to Hollywood?
Somebody mentioned that it wasn't my piece, but yeah, I think it was. I think it was both Hollywood and investors. Because, well, personally, I found it extremely entertaining because a lot of people that I like and admire were on stage. And I also happened to be in the wrong place at the right time afterwards. There were more stars that actually were on stage. And they all came out at once. And I was talking to Richard Waters at the Financial Times. So I was busy working, and all these stars came out, and I felt all of a sudden like a 15-year-old because Chris Evans, Captain America, was just walk right past me, and I said sorry to Richard, and I did my like inside little scream of a 15-year-old. So there were big names there, and a lot of them. Octavia Spencer was there, obviously the ones that you saw on stage. Tim Robbins was there, and Apple released the picture of all the people that they were working with, and if not all, like 90% of those people were on campus, and they had a party afterwards and all of that. So it was entertaining in that respect, but it felt that they were trying to convince, first of all, Wall Street that they are in this in a serious way, and then Hollywood in as much as showing the talent that they have already been able to, to take on and work with, and I think that's important, and in a way that was the best promise that we got as far as the content, because we didn't, like you said, we didn't see a great deal of what's coming. And so, you trust that the people that they have working with them will bring out content that you're going to like. And there's a little bit of for everybody, because it's funny, you kind of go, you walk around Silicon Valley and everybody is into tech. And I mean, not people that work for tech, but, I went to my pet store and I found myself discussing for 15 minutes with the guy who runs the pet store, who used to be in entertainment. And he had his ideas, and he was like, well, some of the people nobody cares about. If you're thinking millennials and Gen Z, they don't care about Spielberg. They don't even know who Spielberg is. And they should have had somebody, a bit more contemporary and a bit kind of hot now, like Lin-Manuel Miranda, Hamilton. And I was like, well, yeah, but if you actually look, they do. They have actually one of the cast on was there and kind of part of the people that were working. But in the list that they showed, there was a slide with all the names of people that they're working with. Spike Lee was on there. They have really a little bit of different topics, different genre, different ages, a little bit for everyone. But we still have not a lot of detail of, how much we're going to pay for it and when it's coming, how much content.
That was the other thing for me. It felt very fluffy. It was all, it's not coming yet, but when it does, it will be amazing. And you're going to love it.
Trust it. Yes.
Yeah, you're going to love it. But we can't tell you when or how much or what or much of anything else, really.
We did learn, though, that is different, right? So I think one part for me that was interesting was the fact that leading up to it, pretty much everybody was thinking about it in like a Netflix kind of way. So, it's one place where you go and you have a collection the same way as you do with Netflix, and it's not. So you have two parts of the service. You have the TV app that is being redesigned, and then you have the TV Plus, which is their own content. So in a way, you have Apple as an aggregator, where you go in, right? You go in and you subscribe to whatever content you want. And then as part of that, whatever content you want, you have Apple content. And so that's very different than what Netflix is, because Netflix is a one-stop shop where, is the library that they built, and their content. And so it is, I think about it in a different way, which is going to make it for consumers not like an either or, because it's not like that. You can drop Netflix and just get TV Plus and think that you have parity, because you won't have that.
No.
And so it's going to be a question of, okay, so do I keep Netflix? Is the Apple TV Plus worth it for me? And that will depend on the content, which we haven't seen in great details. So it is, at least we got that, I think, clearer in our mind as far as the role that Apple wants to play.
And of course, it did intrigue me, but yes, how much is it going to cost? It's already a crowded market. Obviously, you've got you've got Netflix, you've got Amazon Prime Video, you've got Hulu and Roku and all these other people. I suppose the one thing that does give you is probably some kind of gauge of how much it's going to cost, because here satellite TV services here in the UK, or cable in the US, or Netflix or Amazon Prime. We know what sort of money those come out. We know what you're likely to have to lay down, and the Apple TV Plus is probably going to fall in the same bracket, because that's just how it has to be. You can't. I
agree with you.
It would be very difficult
totally.
to launch Apple TV Plus and charge double what everybody else is charging, because it just won't fly. Of course, there's also quite a lot of talk around some of the content being free if you have Apple. If you have Apple products. Again, no mention of that, so it's all very vague, I have to admit. And of course, the other thing was, we were talking. Yes, it's going to be on certain smart TVs, Samsung and a couple of other
LG.
big brands. Yeah, LG, a couple of other big brands. Did they say it was going on Hulu?
No. Hulu is working with them for the aggregation part. No, it's going on Roku.
Roku. It's going on Roku and a few other places, at least at the moment. So it's not purely on Apple devices.
Correct.
But they didn't mention Windows and they didn't mention Android. Now, this is something you talked about and you've written about, and I agree with you 100%, actually. It feels very much like iTunes at the start, in that iTunes was Apple only to begin with and then expanded out. And I'm in agreement with you that why would you try and pitch it at the moment to Android or Windows or wherever, when at the moment you've got nothing hard, you've got nothing concrete.
That's right. Right.
And they're an audience who are, if not actively hostile to Apple, they're certainly not Apple followers.
As receptive,
and they're certainly not as receptive as Apple users might be to, Apple users might be, jazzed by this and think, right, this is something to look forward to, something that we're interested in. I think most Android or even Windows users at the moment would be, because
there are alternatives. It's not a question of not liking or liking Apple. It's the fact that from a Windows user perspective, it's like, okay, I already subscribe to Netflix, or already subscribe to Hulu, I already have cable, whatever it is, right? Nobody's out there screaming, we need another streaming service.
No.
And that's what Apple is facing. But I do think that, if they're thinking about rolling out, the reality is that a lot of people don't watch this kind of content on their TVs only, right? And so if they want to be successful, they need to get into as many households, in as many devices as they can. And I think that first going Windows makes a lot of sense.
I do too,
just because a lot of iPhone owners have a PC, is as simple as that. And so if you're paying for a service, why don't you will want to appreciate that service wherever you want, because you do that today with Netflix. And those are, that's definitely something that from a consumer perspective, you will be comparing. It's like, where can I watch this thing, right? And if it starts to be only on Apple devices, it is restricted, because not everybody has an iPhone, an iPad, and a Mac, right?
No,
And
well,
so
and
you
Apple
start having
TV and the whole, the whole
correct.
ecosystem.
So yeah, so I think that Windows makes a lot of sense, and then over time, yeah, why not Android? But you need to have, they have to have a very compelling content to go and then say, hey, whatever is the next Game of Thrones, and it comes out and it's huge. And then the Android people's like, yeah, I want to see that. I want to whatever. But you can't go out now when you have no price, no content, and you're basically going to people and say, trust me, it's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Why?
Well,
you can't even buy it, right? So there's no point.
yeah, precisely. And this is not really a dig, but if you're a Windows user, trust me, it will be awesome, is something they've heard from Microsoft multiple times and been let down. So I think a lot of Windows users are a bit shy of trust me, it will be brilliant. Yeah, so I agreed with you on that. I just think it's too early. I mean, it's almost too early to be announcing it to Apple followers. To be honest, that was almost a teaser in some
Yeah, because
respects.
it's coming in the fall is the one that we have to wait the longest for.
Yeah,
Because everything else is coming before that. Apple Card is coming May, and then there's Arcade, which I'm sure will come after WWDC, just because that is probably the only one that has a developer component. And then in the fall, we'll have the Apple TV Plus.
Yes. And interestingly, of course, if it comes in the fall, it could come. Often Apple have a September-October event, so it could follow some additional hardware release.
Possibly, but it also follows the content schedule.
It does.
That fall is all always when you get like Siri either starting or coming back.
Yeah.
And then you get into that cycle. So
I was going to say, the fall is very much almost like the academic year. That's when That's when the Hollywood machine rolls into semester one, as it were.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's something I'm interested to follow, because the other thing with that is they are promising that to not be US only. But they say 100 plus countries.
Yeah.
Which is
Which
good.
I think makes a lot of sense, because if you're going into TVs as well as Apple devices, that's easier. And then the other thing that you have, I think, with content, as many shows have proven, is that it is a multicultural and multi-country phenomena. And with video, you have dubbing and subtitles. And most countries do subtitles. There are some countries like, my home country in Italy and Spain, they still do, everything is dubbed, which is obviously a lot of work, but also keeps a lot of people employed in Italy. But it's easier to do a show in English and then put subtitles in. So much more than not, for instance, with music, where local content is much more important. And so you've seen a bit of a different rollout when it came to Apple Music.
That was something I was going to bring up, although, on stage it was very US centric. I think that again refers back to the way that they were probably talking to Hollywood more than us. But, if you go on, one thing that Netflix does have is it does have a lot of European films here in Europe. You'll get Danish films and Spanish films.
Even here.
Well, in fact, one of my only gripes about Netflix is quite often they will say something's in English. And there was a film I kept coming across, I don't know, something Viking Saga or something. And I thought, that sounds really interesting. And it's in Norwegian. It has
your Norwegian is not so good?
Yeah, my Norwegian, I'm afraid I only speak English and profane. I mean, it's subtitled, and I will get round to watching it. But quite often, what happens, at sort of 10:30 at night, you think I'm looking for a film to fill in the rest of the evening, and you select it, and then it's like, it's too much like hard work at 11 o'clock at night to be reading Norwegian, subtitled films. But that is something that I think if they roll out, to 100, 150 countries, they are going to need to bring on board regional
Yeah.
producers. But again, that's something that they can do with time, and those things work with time because a lot of people aren't prepared to commit until that they can see that it's actually worth committing to. If Apple TV flops in, I don't know, Italy or Germany or wherever, why would German or Italian producers bother to put their content on there?
Yeah. And I think the other part, because there's, there were people questioning the money that is going to go into all of this, and, how much having those big stars is going to cost them. And to continue to produce content, because you can't do like 4 series in a year. People continue to expect content throughout. And my hope is that in a bit, Apple style, they've done that with music quite a bit, is that they'll go and work also with people that we never heard of. And that's where maybe, some of that local component is going to come on as well. Because it is not just about the big names. Content is good content, and there was a bit of a controversy, the fact that Steven Spielberg was on stage at Apple after he was talking poorly about Netflix and how Netflix is not Hollywood, which is ironic, of course. But the idea is that you're gonna help bring on content-based great content, and some of the Netflix and Amazon content is like that. You don't have the big name either as actors or directors and producers, and the content is fabulous. So I think I'm hoping that that's also what they want to do, and help bring on and highlight new talent.
Yeah, because that was part of their pitch, wasn't it? The home of fabulous storytelling. So
yeah.
And that is one thing that Netflix I do appreciate on Netflix, because you come across original content, Netflix content, which is from people you've never heard of, contains nobody you recognise, and they're amazing series. So we'll have to see where that goes, really. Right, well, the Apple, of course, there's the Apple Card. Let's backtrack to the Apple Card. Slightly surprised by that, even though there'd been rumours, swirling for some time about that. I'm not really sure what I feel about that. It came across as we're going to completely, disrupt the credit card market, and it had some nice features. I think, the ability to pay more than once a month and all these other things. A lot of that was nice, but also, again, I felt a lot of that referred to the American experience. I feel here in Europe, the way credit cards behave is somewhat different. And we have a lot of cards here that will give you cash back or rewards or discounts or whatever. So, although there are a lot of people, I've heard a lot of people saying, I want that card, even if I never use it. I just want it because I want to have the titanium thing in my wallet. Somebody said, I'll put it on a string and wear it round my neck like a name tag. because my name is etched on it in titanium. But I, not being in the US, I don't know how that compares.
It is actually quite interesting, because the experience, you're absolutely right, but that Europe and the US are 2 different markets when it comes to banking in general. I mean, here it does feel not just, some people were talking about the outrageous interest rates that credit cards have, and, Apple has a range that is similar to ours, but what they were talking about was that you will give it an interest rate that is linked to you and what your credit score is. And so if you have a good credit score, your interest rate will be low versus, everybody gets the same kind of thing. But what was interesting to me was how they started that conversation, which was around Apple Pay and how the US is still trailing. And it's not because of something that Apple is doing wrong, but because the whole country is stealing the boonies when it comes to financial services.
That is true. I mean,
I mean, as a European, and I was using contactless card in the UK when I left, and it took forever for to get chip and pin. We just got chip and pin 2 years ago. I mean, come on, people. This is the state of the US,
and that was that's the thing that's come up on this show before when we've had Americans and Europeans on at the same time. And one of the reasons that Apple Pay seems to have become a big thing with a lot of Americans is compared to the mess that appears to be your debit card system. And us as Europeans were like, what do you mean you're still swiping and signing for something? It's like, get out of the dark ages.
Tax here. Yeah. I mean, really?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I think probably
you pay a fortune for because your bank is charging you for checks.
I mean, here in Europe, I mean, almost nobody uses a check. About the only things checks get used for are occasionally big transactions between companies.
Right.
There we go.
Yeah, it's a sad state of affairs when it comes to banking here. So I think that there's definitely an appeal in the US for sure. There were a few things that I liked, and we got more details of how the card works during the week. A couple of reporters were briefed and given a little bit more detail on the card, and Panzerino at TechCrunch wrote the first piece around it, and the interesting part was how the physical card works, because the card, aside from being cool to be worn around the neck, apparently for some, and have your name, the name is the only thing you have on the card, and then all the other information is on your iPhone, which makes it encrypted and secure, and also gives you the option to change your card number after a transaction. So say you are paying online with a retailer that you've not used before, and the retailer doesn't accept Apple Pay, so you're using the card that is the number that is associated with your physical card. Well, after you've done your transaction, you can change that card, you as a user. So a new number will be generated so that card cannot be used in a fraudulent way. And I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, that is really nice, isn't it? That's very clever.
And it's clever. The other part that I thought was extremely clever, if you are prepared to put all your finances on that card, is basically that they're doing all your management for you. And so looking at transaction and being somebody who travels a lot, I do get that, when I pay for, I don't know, like a taxi or whatever, they have obscure names, and you're like, what? So what day was that? Was I in Chicago that day, or no? Was I in San Diego? And you don't know. And so having the ability to actually see the location, and actually you have a map pinpoint to it, and have a proper name versus a gobbledygoo of whatever the code for that retailer is, makes keeping track of your finances and also spot things that you didn't do much easier. Because if Tiffany comes up in my receipt, I know it wasn't me. So that's interesting.
Yeah. So
the other part that people were complaining about was, and I'm curious, because I don't remember this in the UK. How many people do you think in the UK have one card for multiple people? Because this was a big no-no apparently on the Apple card, that they only do one card to one people, which to me was like, duh, of course, because the information is on your phone. So how would you otherwise be able to manage multiple people? But it never occurred to me that you would share a card. But apparently in the US, that's a common practice. I don't remember that from Europe.
Well, here in the UK, you can do that. People do that. It's not fantastically common, but quite often.
That's what. Okay.
Quite often, a married couple might have, they'll
one.
hold a credit card, and then you kind of can attach a sub card. So it's the same account, so that you can carry one, and then your spouse can carry a card, and they're tied to the same account. So it's more of a duplicate card, and then it's simply for the convenience of only having one account.
One account.
Yeah, the Mr. and Mrs. such and such account, or whatever. Let's not be non-diverse here. A couple of whatever may wish to have one credit card account, and I won't say it's fantastically common, but people do it. It's not frowned upon. In the same way as my wife and I have a joint account, and we have separate debit cards, but they both
what we had when we were in the UK.
Yeah, and they both draw on the same account. So but yeah, credit cards. The other reason people would sometimes do that in this country is people will have a credit card, and then they will have a sub card, say for an older teenage child.
Right.
Who maybe doesn't have any credit history or can't get credit, and that card usually can then be capped in certain ways. You could say, okay, well, the maximum spend that they can have per month is this, and no more than that, etc.
Yeah.
So they can't.
That is actually something that I'm still waiting for Apple to do. Having the ability to do. I thought they were always almost getting there with the Apple Cash. But they didn't. The ability to, mostly to be honest with you, for games and other transactions, a small transaction like that. Now, obviously, they give you the ability to put one card to the account you have, and then give permission or not to charge on that card to the child. But I think there's a teaching that I see in having a kid have the ability to manage their own finances in a restricted way, if you like, that I wish they thought about, but we're not quite there yet. Because obviously there are lots of limitations as far as age and all of it.
Yeah. Right. Well, we've covered pretty much that, I think, Carolina. Tell you what, time's ticking on, so shall we just do a couple of other quick ones, grab a cup of coffee, and then run over the other stories? Air Power, of course, got cancelled. Air Power got cancelled. I have to say, personally, that didn't really surprise me. John Gruber has been going on for months that he's been hearing, rumours that Air Power is. The story is that because of the multiple coil structure, they couldn't manage the thermal output correctly, and somebody who may be now in hot water, I suspect, perhaps heated up by chucking a load of air power mats in the bottom of the kettle, convinced the Apple hierarchy that they could fix this problem. And a lot of engineers have said effectively there was no way it was ever going to be fixed. You can't beat the rules of physics. So it wasn't a big surprise to me. In fact, in some ways, it was surprised that it dragged out so long.
To the point where the new AirPods actually state on the box that they are compatible.
Yes.
But I think this is probably kind of the Apple at its best, as far as obviously they could have put something out that had the coils placed in a specific point of the map, right? Because we have that. Actually, Samsung social account, Twitter account was on it the other day, because I posted a picture of.
Yeah, we don't discriminate. There's a picture of a Samsung mat in there.
But I posted a picture after the announcement of the Air Power being cancelled, on my dog looking particularly sad.
Yes.
And the Samsung Twitter replied and said, "Oh, we got you," and obviously they have a map that supports the watch.
Was it don't be so sad, Dharma?
Yes.
We can help you out. Yeah.
Which is true. But that's my point, is like they could have done it that way, but they decided that they preferred to cancel a product because they could not do what they wanted to do, which is basically you putting the device wherever you want it on the mat, then not do what other people are already doing and have been doing for months.
I mean,
so it's fascinating to me that obviously they would have had to kind of swallow some humble pie either way. But they decided to go with canceling, and I would expect that we'll see something with a different technology versus a different design, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the sort of the technical drawings of it, they've got, they were proposing like a sort of Olympic flag kind of. It looks, it looks like a
Yes.
Celtic knot of charging rings, and people who know much more about these things than me have said that it's just never going to work because they're just going to heat up. They're effectively going to microwave each other. So there we go. Yeah, I think you're right. I think better to cancel it than to come out with what is effectively just the same as everybody else, a mat with 3 or 4 charging coils in it. But I'm just surprised it took them so long. That was my thing. You'd have thought from a PR point of view, I think they should have pulled it earlier and just said, look, sorry, we announced this and we were too soon. And
well, certainly not put out AirPods with the writing on the box before, because if you look, obviously the AirPods were already way before, because they need to mass produce these things and all of it. But they obviously either somebody really was not going to give up on this thing. They were adamant it's going to work, or something went wrong really quickly from the moment they decided to put out AirPods with the writing and then canceling, because it's been all in the same, like within a week. So it seems a bit.
I think there've been problems with the AirPower probably almost from the start. I think it's somebody just really not wanting to give up on it because it sounds like a brilliant idea. But to be honest, I'm still of the school of thought that if you're going to lay it down on a pad, why not just stick a plug in it? You might as well stick a cable in the bottom of it and charge it that way. But I'm still waiting for true over-the-air power, Carolina. And I don't care if I get microwaved, or I don't care if I get microwaved.
But that's why I think, a new technology, I agree with you. It's like the amount of radiations that, I receive every day in whatever thing that I'm using is, my brain is gone already. But I think that was really surprised me about Apple, that, she's been around for forever. And, I had Nokia phones that I could put down on a lazy boy charger that was a pillow and charge. And here we come in 2018 with Apple announcing that, and it had to be spectacular to be so behind. And that's why I was surprised that they actually went with Qi versus not quite what you want to do, but a step closer to your vision, which is the I forgot now the technical name of that charging, but it's magnetic kind of charging
resonance,
where that's it. Yeah. So where you can have, buying like a table or covering, the surface of a table and put your devices on without having to worry where the device is and if it's charging or not, because it is. So that feels more like Apple, but the technology has some drawbacks because charging is very slow, and you still have problems with interference and all of that. And so I think that this was their idea of, okay, it's not quite like a coffee table big, but is a mat and you can put it wherever you want. And I agree with you with the stick a cable in it when is a phone or an iPad. But I have to say with the watch, my bedside table now, I relegated the picture of my husband and daughter to somewhere else because it's just all charging stuff.
Well, that is true. My bedside cabinet is a sea of cables.
Yeah.
Admit,
And that's where, the ability to, especially with the watch, is such a natural thing to do if you're not wearing it at night, to just take it off and put it, on a table, to have a mat to put it on. And we're not quite there yet because it is a different kind of charging mechanism for Apple Watch. But that's, and AirPods is the same. And so I think the more devices you have, the more the mat makes sense. But yeah, I still have cables from everywhere in the house.
And of course, Stephen Sinofsky put out a tweet and saying the only really the only really unique thing about the AirPower was that Apple pre-announced it, and maybe that was a bad plan. As he says here, products don't come with lists of features you can cut, which is why product development as a reality show is a bad idea. And as an ex-Microsoft guy, I think he should probably know all about that.
Yes.
Microsoft famously had some terrible vaporware incidents in the past. Not so much now, but certainly in the past. Right, well, I'll tell you what. Shall we take a 5-minute break, Carolina, and you can get some more coffee, because I know it's god-awful early where you are. And then we'll come back and we'll skim over the rest of the technology stories, and then I'll let you get off. So we'll have... There's no Nemo's hardware store this week, because John is otherwise engaged. So after this short musical interlude, Carolina and I will be back. And after that short interlude, we are back. So, Carolina, we've got a few stories. We don't want to dwell on them too long. Apple have hired Tesla's head of electric powertrains.
There you go. That's their power. No, I'm kidding.
This was on Electrek, and one of the guys in the Slack room actually posted this. I don't tend to pay too much attention to, hirings and leavings, comings and goings.
Yeah,
because I've said on this
very Silicon Valley. Yeah.
Well, I've said on this show before that the sort of people we're talking about here, they're people who are top of their field, and often I feel that they go somewhere, they do something, they take on a challenge or something they feel is interesting, they stay 4 or 5 years, and then they move on to something else.
Yeah.
Or they get a better offer. So Apple has apparently hired Tesla's head of electric powertrains. Of course, that's sparked speculation about
new rumors on
does that mean Apple is making a car? I don't want to get into that too much, but that did catch my interest. Similarly, I haven't put this in the show notes, but there are rumors that the head of the Apple chip division has left. Although apparently his bio still says that he works for Apple, but there are rumours that the guy who developed the A7, 8, 9, etc., 12 is going to be leaving. I mean, it could simply be, as far as I know, that he's retiring. I mean, I've no idea how old he is. He might simply say, "That's enough for me. I'm done."
I'm done. Yeah.
So apparently, going forward, it's likely someone else will be in charge of the A series processors. But again, they've I feel that Apple have collected a quality team of top of field chip designers and engineers, and I'm pretty sure that they will be quite capable of carrying on regardless. These sort of things don't tend to revolve around one person, much as people like to think, Johnny Ive does it all. I'm pretty sure he does not.
Especially now, it is, post Jobs, Apple has become a very different company as far as, really working as a team versus having one superstar. And, just the amount of people that I have access to now compared to 10 years ago has changed quite a bit. And as far as specifically the silicon side of things, if you read some of our more local news, especially in some things, Southern California, in San Diego, where Qualcomm is, there's definitely a lot of hiring that is happening there. And obviously, that given what everybody's expecting, which is Apple to be taking on also the modem part of the silicon. You need different expertise and different kind of people. So I agree with you. I mean, I don't think there's a lot to read into it. Certainly not read into it that Apple is going to be in any kind of trouble when it comes to their next chipset release.
No, not at all. I just it was something that came up in
Yeah.
the things. So let's move on. Security and privacy. This is a little section I like to do. MEPs have called for EU websites to be scrubbed of trackers from the register. Actually, that headline is slightly misleading. It should actually say for EU government websites to be scrubbed of trackers. In a somewhat outrageous revelation, in a post GDPR world, it's come to light that about 83% of European government websites, not necessarily like .gov.uk, but various things, tax portals and health portals and various other government websites all over Europe, by the way, are infested with trackers, often Google trackers. And unsurprisingly, the MEPs have said this isn't exactly this isn't a good look, is it? We're telling people with GDPR you're not going to you should have the right not to be tracked. Government websites should most certainly not be infested with trackers. So there we go. There's not a lot to say about that, really.
That's actually made me think that I was it's tax time in the UK. April in the US. April 15 is the date. So I was checking some stuff on the IRS website, which is the Inland Revenue website. And sure enough, now that I think about it, next time I went on, I can't remember if it was Facebook or somewhere else, I found a TurboTax ad, clearly trying to help me out with my own taxes. So I guess there's something like that going on here too.
There we go. I can highly recommend Ghostery for that, Carolina.
I will look into that. Yes.
Ghostery.com. You can figure that too. It's a free blocker and allows you to block trackers and all sorts of unpleasantness. And I highly recommend it. I really do. We've had them on the show before as well. And they also have a browser called Clix, which is CLIQZ, which is basically combines anti-tracking technology and safe searching and all the rest. There we go. So I'm a bit tinfoil hatted like that. So, yes, Article 13 and Article 11. The EU has passed the copyright directive, which will lead to a more censored internet. You'll find this all over the place as well. Private internet access posted this one. I'm very sad about this, to be honest. The EU did a great thing with GDPR, I think, although a lot of people moaned about it, but I think that was a very good thing. And everybody seems to agree that this, copyright directive is well-intentioned, but everybody who works in tech seems to agree that it's a terrible, terrible implementation, and it's going to lead to a lot of trouble. The worst of which is saying, a lot of sites might simply have to shut off at least the ability to upload content from people who live in the EU in order to protect themselves from getting slammed with massive EU fines. Yeah. It's it is. It's one of those, yes, what to do except to breathe in heavily and say, I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens, because no doubt these things will be tested in courts of law, and they will either be, found wanting and passed back to the EU and told to sort it out, or they will not turn out to be as terrible as we thought, or I don't know. Only time will tell on that, but I'm pretty sure that Article 13 or 17 as it's become, and 11 are not a good thing. Not a lot to say about that, really, is there? It's kind of outside my field of reference and probably yours. Well, shall we move on? Facebook's Zuckerberg calls for global internet regulation. This is...
Of course
he does. Yes, I found this somewhat amusing, really. On the surface, it's all the right things. It's Mark Zuckerberg saying, social media has too much control and too much power and knows too much, and we need people to take control. But at the same time, it smacks of saying one thing and doing another. I'm just never convinced by Mark Zuckerberg, I'm afraid. He does not.
Yeah,
he does not come across with any
I share your skepticism.
He never appears to have any sincerity whatsoever. He seems to continue doing whatever the hell he likes, and then when he gets caught with his fingers in the cookie jar, he does the kind of little boy lost face but I didn't really know what was going on. As somebody described it to me the other day, when you find a child who's been eating the cookies, and you say, "Are you eating cookies?" and they seem to believe if they keep their mouth shut for 20 seconds until the biscuit crumbs have gone, they won't get caught.
But it's interesting as well that what he's calling for specifically is around hate and terrorism, and so the negative part that comes out over and over and again, and the last time was for the very sad incident in New Zealand with a terrorist in the mosque, where he live streamed on Facebook the killing, and that was viewed a numerous amount of time before it was taken down. And it seems to me that he's calling out something specifically that doesn't hurt his business, is actually helping his business. If there's a regulation around it, and something that clearly they can't do by themselves. That's the extent to which he's actually saying we need to be regulated, or there needs to be some kind of intervention. But God forbid, that intervention is going to come in to limit what he can do that is to the advantage of the business model. He's calling for things that will help him versus hinder his business. Yes. Which is very smart.
Yeah, and also, of course, he's calling it regulations should set baselines for what's prohibited and require companies to build systems for keeping harmful content to a bare minimum. It seems to me that what he's also attempting to do is to abrogate responsibility, because
correct,
almost a case of, well, we didn't, when the next bad thing turns up on Facebook, he can say, well, we weren't looking for that. We did
what we were supposed to. Yeah.
We weren't looking for that because you never told us not to do that. And that's a kind of, you can't prove a negative. It's we've blocked, I don't know, pornography and hate speech and this and that and the other. Well, what do you mean we didn't block fill in new horrible incident, I don't know. I'm sorry, I have no faith in Mark Zuckerberg whatsoever. And I also read another piece, which I haven't bothered to link, but it was, Mark Zuckerberg, the lonely king at the top as his aides desert him.
Yes, a lot of people left.
Yeah, which is a strange position, because it's he in that respect, he's becoming a complete autark over, the sort of Steve Jobs of Facebook. There is no one, no one will, there's no one to say no. Everybody.
No, that's right.
And I say do this, and everybody does it, or else. From what I've read, the guys from Instagram left, the guys from WhatsApp left. Several early investors and supporters have basically turned on Facebook. I'm not sure what's going to happen there, but I'm pretty sure that if Mark Zuckerberg becomes kind of king emperor, God emperor of Facebook, that's only going to end very badly for him and probably Facebook itself. And ironically, this is one that broke, as you said, literally broke pretty much before we came on air. The US has charged Facebook with high-tech housing discrimination. This was on ABC News. The US, what department is it? It says here. The federal government has charged Facebook with high-tech housing discrimination for misusing its vaunted ability to deliver ads with surgical precision. Basically, they're saying that Facebook allowed landlords and real estate brokers to exclude groups such as non-Christians, immigrants, minorities, people of colour, etc., for seeing ads for houses and apartments. It's the Department of Housing and Urban Development, apparently. And that is, of course, typical of the whole, that's the whole Cambridge Analytica thing again, isn't it? It's they know so much about you and promise advertisers that they can surgically deliver to who they like. And the downside of that is they can also exclude anybody else they don't like in what appears to be a disgraceful, discriminatory manner. And if that's true, I hope Facebook and not only Facebook, to be honest. If the
anybody,
but also in this case, I would be hoping that the
Google.
department would be going after the real estate brokers and landlords themselves for doing such a thing.
That's actually a very good point, because they're the one using the service as such.
Yeah, I mean, in that respect, to some extent, in this case, I'm not sure that I particularly hold Facebook to blame. That's one of those, you can use a hammer to drive in a nail. You can also use it to bash in somebody's head.
Well, that's exactly the point, right? With technology, a lot of times is the fact that you create something, and so you have the ability to do the opposite of what is being used for, and then the choice is in whoever is using the technology. And in this case, you're totally right. It is the estate agents and landlords that are using that versus the opposite. They could have used it to actually show, especially in Silicon Valley, where real estate is so expensive, and we're living every day with the fact that essential services, people working in essential services, are moving out of the area because they can't afford it. And a lot of times those are people that belong to minorities. But, you also have, anything from teachers to nurses to, firefighters to, anything that is non-tech related.
Well, I mean, we've got a similar, although probably not quite so bad, situation here in the UK where people who are on what you might call, average incomes, non-stratospheric, tech industry incomes. So, like you say, teachers, firemen, nurses, and the like, who are essential support staff, are having to move away from London, to places like Rugby or whatever, and where they're maybe an hour away by train.
Yeah.
And even the cost of commuting and the extra time.
Yeah, especially in the UK. Yeah.
Means that they can continue working because the prices around London are just unbearable.
Yeah.
A bit like your cat post on Twitter. Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley encapsulated in a picture. Yeah, you're either living in a palace or a cardboard box you can't actually afford. I wasn't quite sure which of your cats was in the palace because a cardboard box is a cat palace.
The one in the box. Yeah. She's she thought she had it. The other one was heavily depressed.
I'm not in the box. Yeah. But I suppose you could read it the other way. The other cat is in your palace and the other one is in a cardboard box.
That's true. Yeah.
Whichever, I thought it was incredibly apt, actually. It's very, very good. Right, well, we're coming pretty much to the end there. I've got a couple of worth of chirps Several people in the Slack room have mentioned Card Hop for iOS, which makes contact management quick and simple. The link I've got here is from Cult of Mac. Yeah, I don't have a problem personally with the the built-in contacts address app on iOS, but I know a lot of people find it very lacking. I don't have hundreds and hundreds of contacts, so maybe it's sufficient for what I want. But lots of people have said that it's not really very good. You probably have hundreds and hundreds of contacts, so I don't know what. What do you think of the inbuilt contacts app, or do you not use that? Do you use something else?
I don't use it very much, to be honest with you, because of work. This is one of the sad things about the Apple world, is that I think they totally abandoned their iWork suite, and so as far as keeping up with innovation and integration of different support, and so I live in Office, and so all my contacts are on an Exchange server for work, and there's no work and play for me, so everybody is in the same place. So that's mostly what I use. There are some features of the Contact app that I like, as far as how they're not just displayed, but then how they're integrated. But yeah, sorry, is Office.
So Card Hop for iOS apparently makes contact management quick and simple, and a lot of guys in the Slack room are recommending that one. And Alistair in the Slack room, who is a big Luminar user, says he found a video incredibly informative, not only on the topic it claims to be about, as there are other useful tips in there, and that's on YouTube, and the link is in the show notes. And, well, there you go. If Alistair says it's interesting and informative and useful, I suggest if you're a Luminar user, you go and take a look. And that's pretty much it for the show, Carolina. Oh, one more here, just a snippet. This is in the Daily Mail Online, which is a paper which I would not normally have any truck with. It's a dodgy, extremely right-wing and reactionary. But mother and daughter rescued by new police tool. And the reason I mention this is because it's What 3 Words, which came up on the show last week, which is a location app which divides the world up into some ludicrously large trillion 3-meter square blocks, and each one is tagged with 3 words. And the idea is that from the app or from an online version, if you're in an accident or something and you are confused and not sure where you are, you can get your location in the form of 3 words, not a long number of
coordinates.
Not a GPS coordinates.
It's super smart.
And this woman was in an accident, went off the road, whatever, and says, she was confused and shocked and disoriented and couldn't remember where she was going or where she'd come from, and was able to simply give the emergency services the 3-word code, which allowed them to pinpoint her down to, within about 1.5 meters.
That's awesome.
And her and her daughter were then, promptly rescued. So there we go. And that's called What 3 Words, by the way, and it's free for iOS and Android, and is available as a mobile website as well. So there we go. Thank you, Carolina.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me. This was a nice chat.
Well, there we go. This is the bit where we normally wind up, where you get to pimp wherever places people can find your work. As we like to say, you can promote your online presence. So take it away.
I'll take it away. Well, I have a weekly column on Tech.pinions.com. And then you can find me on Twitter at Caro_Milanesi, Milanesi. And I am planning something new, which is not live yet, but it would be a bit of a website. It would be a website that would be more focused on the two topics that I said I'm very passionate about, which are diversity and education. There's only that much that I think the Tech.pinions audience can bear of me talking about women in tech. So I feel I'm going to take some of that to a different place.
Well, I don't think that middle-aged plus white guys can be told enough about the need for diversity. And I class myself as a middle-aged plus white guy. So, no, I think everybody should keep banging on about diversity of all kinds. So there we go. And that, I think, is about it. Oh, yes. And before I forget, I need to offer a very special thank you to Alistair Jenks from the Slack room, who sent a special donation to support the show. Thank you very much, Alistair. Very much appreciated indeed. I am, of course, on the Twitter as @Serenak, and that's SERENAK. The show tweets very occasionally as @EssentialApple. All of our stuff is, of course, on the essentialapple.com website. And there we go. I think that's probably about it. So thank you once again, Carolina, and I'll let you get off and we'll wrap the show up. So this is the point where we go, goodbye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Essential Apple podcast, and I'd like to say if you enjoy the show and would like to support us, feel free to go over to the website essentialapple.com and you will find links to both Patreon and the Pinecast Tips Jar, where you can make a donation towards the costs of the show, or even if you're really keen, you could set up a recurring payment. And thank you very, very much to all the people who already do support us. We really do appreciate you very much indeed. This show is, of course, part of the My Mac podcasting network, where you can find a variety of other shows like the My Mac podcast with Guy and Gaz, the G-Men, Tech Fan with Tim and David, the Nintendo Club podcast, the geekiest show ever, the Three Geeky Ladies, Bart Bouchot's and his wonderful Let's Talk Apple, and possibly some more that I've forgotten. So why not go over to mymac.com, take a look at the available podcasts, and take a listen.
Hi, I'm Bart Bouchotz, host of the Let's Talk Apple podcast. Every month I gather together a panel of Apple followers and we digest the month's Apple news. Our aim is to step back and take a 40,000-foot view of all things Apple. We're the perfect complement to the many great daily news shows out there. Listen and subscribe at www.lets-talk.ie.
Has been the Essential Apple podcast. Goodbye and thank you for listening.